I microdosed on Datura for a few months, feeling no noticeable effects. Then, like a ton of bricks, it all hit me, and I spent a year with what I can only call schizophrenia. I'd been experimenting lightly with Datura for a while. I'd add a bit of Datura leaf to a bowl of weed, but that was about it. I never wanted a full-on trip. I just thought it gave an interesting buzz. So I started growing the plants, and they make a ton of seeds. I started to eat 3 seeds a day. It was a nice little buzz, kinda like weed, but one thing I noticed was at the end of the month, I'd start to trip out a bit. Things would just feel really dreamy. It's hard to describe. I figured maybe all the seeds I had taken had started adding up and hadn't left my system. So I'd stop taking the Datura seeds for a few weeks, rinse, and then repeat. Well, one day, after maybe about 6 months of microdosing, I go into full-blown delirium. I remember being on the computer when something told me to Google a random string of characters. I did, and the only image that returned was a photo of an Arch Linux terminal that showed exactly what I was playing on my iPod, like I was being monitored. It was all downhill from there. Long story shorter, a couple trippy incidents. Thought I was telepathically talking to a famous actress. Then I thought I was telepathically talking to a woman who worked for the government. This went on for weeks. Then I thought it was actually an AI the whole time. I remember once closing my eyes and swinging an axe at a piece of plank in front of my foot so I can test the precision of the AI and prove it didn't want to hurt me. Yeah, I nearly chopped off my toes. I also believed there were cars following me. Yeah, full-blown paranoia, except I thought they were there to help me. I stopped eating the Datura pretty early on into the hallucinations, but it took about a year for them to wear off. Took just as long for me to figure out that I was having delusions, and nothing from the past year had been real. I ended up being diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic after having MRIs and stuff, but I refused any meds. Half of me still not believing I was hallucinating, and the other half scared of what the effects might be from the medication. About 2 years after the whole thing happened, I was back to normal. Obviously, it's hard to be sure what the hell happened here. Was it the Datura, or did I have a mental breakdown from something else? I can't say for sure. I don't take Datura anymore though, and I still smoke a lot of weed, and things are back to normal. Everyone says don't take Datura. Listen to them. I did Datura twice. The first time. It started slow, and first I started to lose balance. Everything that was close started to become blurry. I couldn't read my text on my phone, couldn't see the time. Then I kept forgetting where I was and what I was doing. Also, bad cottonmouth, like 10 times worse than weed. I also got onto a wrong bus, gave the driver all my money, and told him where to drive like I was in a taxi. Friend took my money from the driver and dragged me out of the bus. I was smoking one cigarette after another, but I didn't remember lighting any of them. I got a little pissed because I didn't have hallucinations. That is, until I saw that my pack of cigarettes was full. Later found out that that was a very common trip. But other than that, no hallucinations, and since that was the only point of doing Datura, I decided to chill out for a month and then take a higher dose. The second time. I decided to take the dose at 4 a.m., go to sleep, and set my alarm clock for 9 a.m., so I sleep through the bad part of the trip that starts 2 hours after ingestion and lasts about 3 hours. So I woke up feeling normal, eyesight surprisingly not as bad as the first time, like I was completely sober. Then, I see some girl sleeping in my bed. I start waking her up, and poof, she vanishes, and I find myself holding a blanket. I freak the fuck out and go ask the clock. Not a person, a clock, on my wall. What the fuck was that? And then I realized I was talking to an inanimate object. Freaked the fuck out again, forgot what I was freaking out about, and turned on the TV. While I was watching TV, I look at the wall on my left. A person jumps out of the wall, starts running, and vanishes into another wall. I jump from my chair and then I look at the clock. It says 3 p.m. I start freaking out because I was late for school. I get my backpack, lock the door, and see my friend. We chat and everything is normal. He says, "Dude, where are you going? It's Sunday. There's no school today." I start laughing and start going back to my house when I remember that my friend I saw lives about 10 kilometers from my house and his leg is broken. I turn around and he vanishes. I get back to my house. My mom and dad are home. No tripping. I talk to them and ask how the vacation was. Small talk. Then I go to my room to get my cigarettes, get back to the living room, and they're not there. I call my mom to see where they are, and they say they are still on vacation. I freak the fuck out again, look at the clock, and it's 11:30 a.m. I remember it was 3 p.m. when I left home, so I figure it's worthless looking at the time if I didn't know if I'm hallucinating or the time is right. Then I talked to a glass of water for about an hour. I didn't use words. I could talk to it with my thoughts. I can't remember the conversation except how the glass was complaining about how much its life sucked. After that, I freak out because I was once again talking to an inanimate object. I get paranoid that I might do something stupid, so I lock myself in the house and throw the key through the window and go to sleep. Woke up at about 6 p.m. The trip was long gone. At least I thought so. I went out and chilled with friends, and then I see a couple walking towards us. Nothing weird about them, regular people like the friends I was chilling with, and then I blink and they disappear. And that was the last trip. I was normal the rest of the night. My overall comments on this. This is not a drug. It's more like an Alzheimer's plus schizophrenia. You have moments when you have no idea what is real, where you are, who you are, or what you are doing. But there are moments of clarity, as I like to call them, when you are lucid, just like people with Alzheimer's, and they don't last long. You have about a half a minute between two schizophrenic episodes. I think this is an attention whore drug, because you will not have a good time, but it will make a pretty damn good story. That is, if you survive it. My first experience with Datura stramonium at the age of 17 was very strange and life-changing. It all started one day with me and some friends visiting this very experienced drug user. Let's call him Steve. Steve was about 2 or 3 years older than me. He told us that he had found some Jimson weed near the local community college in the area we all lived in. He offered us to try some Jimson weed with him, but they were too scared and said not today. I was surprised because the two guys I showed up with were very experienced and had tripped on LSD and mushrooms with me many times before. At that moment, when they turned down the offer, I thought I would be brave and said I would try it. At the moment of my acceptance of ingesting the Jimson weed with Steve, I had done no research whatsoever on Datura and didn't even know the chemical name or the dangers of this drug called Jimson weed. Steve handed me a bottle cap the size of a normal 20-ounce soda bottle cap full of Datura seeds. Steve said there were roughly 50 to 60 seeds in it, and I quickly placed them in my mouth and chewed them up, then swallowed them with a small swig of water. After eating the seeds, Steve ate his cap full of seeds, then we all set off to go for a cruise and smoke some marijuana. When we got into the car, Steve pulled out 2 really fat joints of dried Datura leaves. Just as I had not declined the ingestion of the Datura seeds, I smoked joyfully the 2 fat joints with Steve until they were ashed away and gone. After hanging out with all my friends for a little while, I decided to go home and go to bed, a little disappointed that I was not tripping or hallucinating yet from the very large dose of Datura that day. Sometime during the night, I woke up and started hallucinating. I began talking on a non-existent phone in my room for many minutes, and I heard a voice on the other line. The rest of the night was blurry, partly from amnesia I later found out. But when daybreak came and light was outside of my room, the real hallucinations began to reveal themselves. The first thing that happened that morning was I noticed that I was smoking a cigarette in my room, and knowing at the same time that my house is non-smoking. I took a few puffs of the cigarette and blew the smoke out, and actually saw the smoke. Then a few moments later, I looked down at my hand and the cigarette wasn't there. Later on, I began to see one of my friends from high school that sat at my lunch table. He was sitting on my bed, and we began talking, and I told him all about how Steve gave me Jimson weed, and that I was hallucinating really bad at the moment. While talking to my friend that really wasn't there, my mother came into my room and said, "Who are you talking to?" After looking at her and realizing her question, I looked back at where my friend was sitting on the bed, and was bewildered because he was not there anymore. This really confused me, and at that moment, I realized that I was having full-blown hallucinations. I told my mother I was talking to myself to placate her, then she closed my door. After this run-in with my mother, I tried to be more quiet and composed as not to worry her. After my mother heard me tell my friend on the bed that I got Jimson weed from Steve, my mother called Steve's mother and told her all about what had happened. Steve's mother told Steve, then one day at high school, Steve showed up and slammed me against the wall because he thought I ratted him out. I explained to him exactly what had happened and that my mother had overheard. He then understood and apologized. I closed my bedroom door to avoid any more confrontations of my distorted and loose reality with my mother's all-too-real reality. Later on, I glanced at my bed and saw two very beautiful girls that also sat at my lunch table that year in high school. They eventually dissipated into thin air like cigarettes. After all of these visions, I thought to myself that I better check my eyes and see if they are red and or dilated. So I went in front of the mirror and looked into it. Without even catching a glimpse of my face, my current history teacher was in place of my image, and he said, "Hey Andy, how's it going?" This really frightened me, so I sat down for a little and took a few deep breaths. A little later, I walked out to the kitchen for a drink of water. While in the kitchen, I looked over to the fridge and saw my brother was standing there in his boxers and a t-shirt and looking into a food-stocked fridge. I had noticed that with my other hallucinations, if I looked away from the actual hallucination that was in my vision and looked back at the place where the vision was, the hallucination would disappear. Just to make sure this image of my brother was real, I looked away for a split second and looked back quickly. I was amazed to see my brother was gone and the fridge door was completely closed. It was at this moment that I felt something was really wrong. My parents decided that the best thing to do was to go to the hospital. While they were taking me there, I was fully awake and clear-minded, except for 15 seconds during the trip where I had total amnesia. My parents later said that for 15 or so seconds, I thought my dad and mom in the front seats were the two guys that took me to Steve's house the night before, and then I began talking to my parents as if they were my friends. Directly after this slight amnesia, I snapped out of it and everything was normal the rest of the day. And I had no recollection of this 10 to 15 second memory loss. When I got to the hospital, my father waited in the waiting room, and I was placed with my mother in a small room generally made for psychiatric inpatient holding in the emergency room. While waiting in the small room with the door ajar, I heard the sound of a heart monitor beeping like normal. After a few seconds, the beeping noises turned into one solid continuing tone of a long beep. After hearing this continuing tone, a few nurses and a doctor rushed to the room, but it seemed that the person died, because then I heard a few people crying and all the beeping noises stopped. This experience was very surreal because my mother had also heard and saw what happened to this person in the ER. A nurse eventually came into my room and told me that I had ingested a strong poison and that I should be okay because I was displaying no more symptoms of hallucinations. The nurse told me never to do this drug again. She offered me some medication to help me sleep, but I declined, and my parents and I went home. This experience with Datura was very strange, rewarding in a small aspect of life, but very dangerous. Hello, I'm reporting back. Finally, I'm safe and I'm okay. Sadly, I'm very messed up in my head right now. Doctors gave me depersonalization and derealization. I have regret my decision overall and that I shouldn't have done it. I was in the hospital for about 3 days, tripping. Here's what I remember so far. So I took the seeds. About an hour later, I got up confused, not knowing where I was or who I was. I was trying to text people on Reddit for my comments. I couldn't read or anything. I remember looking up and seeing a hanging man swinging like a GIF. Every time I looked away and back, it would restart. Then I stopped and blacked out. My father was screaming and I couldn't understand, but I remember the walls turned brown and everything was a brown world. I couldn't tell what was real or fake. The faces in the walls would say things to me like, "Kill yourself or die." I felt drunk, very drunk, and I puked everywhere. I think it was blood from the state I was in, but I have no idea. I saw lots of distorted people walking around in my home, speaking and screaming at me. I was scared because I didn't know if they were going to attack me or not. Finally, I blacked out once again, waking up to my father driving me somewhere. All I remember is the word hospital. I can't imagine what I put him through. I remember I couldn't see anything throughout the window, just blackness. Then I looked down and saw a little man running across the car floor. I kept laughing, thinking it was funny, but then I saw this entity. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen this, but it was a demon dog, like from Call of Duty Zombies, but it was sitting in the front seat, growling at my father, like it didn't want me to live it, and wanted to see me die. I recall smoking a lot of cigarettes too during the trip. Again, I couldn't tell you what was real or not. As we got to the hospital, I immediately blacked out. I was in the bed, then I woke up in another dimension. I saw thousands upon thousands of dead bodies stacked up on each other, going through into the sky, screaming lots of bloody screams, and blood was stained onto the walls of brownness. And that's really all I recall until I woke up with a horrid headache and the doctor telling me I'll be okay. If you want to try this evil drug, don't. I'm only 17 and ruined my whole life because I wanted to try this plant. I have no friends now and nobody's here for me. I'm so alone and I'm so done. I kinda wish somewhat it would have killed me, but I have my family and that's all that matters. Please do not do this drug. It's not worth it. Thank you for reading, and God bless.